Welcome everyone to episode 4, Dawn of Horror, of Games and Gaming Podcast. In this episode, we talk about some spooky, scary games, even though Halloween is over and no one really cares anymore. I'll also talk about some of the differences between indie games and AAA titles, and Daniel discusses why everyone hates long board games. Except for him, because he's weird like that. Please enjoy. Hello everybody, I'm Mark.
And I'm Daniel.
And last week I did lots of fun things, as always, and those fun things were playing video games, believe it or not. The games that I was playing were mostly the Game of Thrones, the Telltale game, and I was also playing a game that's a PS4 exclusive, and it's Until Dawn. Both games are very different and alike in some ways, and I'd like to explore those with you right now. Is that all right with you, Daniel?
It is.
Okay, good. Good. So the first game was the Game of Thrones, and it's a Telltale game. And if you don't know anything about Telltale games, it's like watching a movie that you can interact with, and you make decisions, and the game changes drastically depending on the decisions that you make. And a very cool thing that I really like is after you're done with a chapter, because it's divided into 6 chapters, all the games that I can think of, all the Telltale games, that is, are divided into 6 chapters. Each chapter, at the end of it, gives you like a rating, not a rating, but like the decisions that you've made. There's usually like 5 or 6 of them.
Right.
Like major decisions that you made.
In comparison with everybody else, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's always fun when you're in like the minority. It's like, oh, only 20% of people chose this one. You're like, yes, I'm a bold adventurer. I'm going where no one's gone before. And one of the decisions that I made, it was less than 5% of people made that decision. So I was happy to be in the vast minority in that one. And I believe the decision was like, I was trying to say it. The decision I made, like ratting out one of the guys for like stealing something or something like that. When they asked me, he's like, well, did you see what happened, or do you know who took it? And I was like, that guy right there, he did it.
Right away.
I threw him under the bus, and then I got into the bus and drove it over him, then backed it up and drove it over him one more time. I mean, I didn't even have to take time to make that decision. I was like, he did it. So yeah, that was a very interesting little thing there. The game is, I mean, it's genius, and I'm so happy that they got the actors from Game of Thrones to voice act in this game.
Oh, nice.
You don't, like, take control of one of the main characters, but you're kind of a side story. And without ruining the entire game, you're, for people who know the lore of Game of Thrones, and man, is that an amazing show. And the books, unfortunately, I haven't read the books, and I can't at this point because I've seen all of the show, and I know the show's different than the books, and the books are different than the show, but I can't do it.
Not too much, but
I tried to read the first book, and I just couldn't do it because I knew everything that happens. And
yeah, I could see that not being as fun. Plus, he also goes into a lot of detail that probably was not in the show, but that's not really needed to get the main story.
Yeah.
in this, so. Yeah,
I mean, and I have friends, and I've talked in great lengths with these people about the books and how they differ, and I'm very happy that I did that because I learned a lot of the like backstory and stuff that I didn't know, and I really I love the Game of Thrones universe.
Oh, cool!
It's fantastic. And so when I saw this game and I saw there was a Telltale game, I was on board. And I am not upset with that decision. It's been fantastic.
Cool. Everything
about the game is just wonderful. The first chapter ends. Oh, the end of the first chapter. It's like I'm not going to say what I was right about to say because that's a huge spoiler. But just know that each chapter it ends perfectly.
Okay.
It's like it ends and you're like, oh, I want to play the next chapter. And luckily,
nice.
I started this game when chapter 5 or episode, it might be actually episode 5 was already out, and they're working on 6 right now. I was able to just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh man, it's really, really good. And the decisions feel like they mean something, because it's usually like a choice. It's usually like, do I save this person? Do I save that person? Do I, rally my troops here, or do I send them off over here? And you're like, well, if I send them off over here, I'm vulnerable, and if I rally them over here, then these people don't get support. And it's really makes you think about these choices. And of course, the game only gives you a limited time to make these choices, and it's just it's so intense. I really, really enjoy it. So I also played the Walking Dead games.
Yes, I've played the first chapter, or episode 1 of that one.
The first season, or just episode 1 of the first season?
First episode of the first season.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I played through the whole first season, and man, is that game good.
That was actually a free download on Xbox Live this month, the whole season, and I've downloaded it, but I haven't played it yet. But I played the first episode, and it's just like that, like you said. It gives you the choices. Do I save this person? Do I save that person? If you save that person, the other person's going to hate you now. Like, the person that loves the person you let die is going to hate you, and it's not going to help you later on and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's something that I really liked, is that it, every decision you make, it affects the game in some way. And whether it just be a little thing of the next time you talk to this character, he's like standoffish, he's like, I can't believe you chose him over her, or you let that person die, you didn't do this. And then it really makes you think about the decision you made, and it's just brilliant the way that they do it.
Yeah.
It just seems like, everything you're choosing, has a consequence, like it does in real life. You choose this over that, something is going to happen either way. And you have to think about those decisions. You have to live with the ones you made. Unless, of course, you go back to a previous save if you don't like what happened, but I haven't done that yet.
Just like real life, right?
Just like real life. You just go back to a previous save. I'm going to go back to yesterday and go ahead and change that decision, because that didn't work out too well.
But yeah, it was. I can't wait to play the next chapters. It sounds pretty. I was pretty excited to play the next chapters. So it's the decisions you get involved. You want to know what happens to your characters and stuff. And even though it's a side story, not in the main Walking Dead story from the show and comics, but still in the same universe. So it's just as important, I guess, and gripping. And the voice acting is good. Like, all that stuff it helps draw you into the experience.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with the Game of Thrones thing, that you're not controlling the main characters because they already have their own story, and you already know what that whole story is, but you're interacting with those main characters, and it's so awesome to hear Peter Dinklage talking as Tyrion, and you're like, oh, it's Peter Dinklage. I love that he's the voice actor. Because if it wasn't him, it would take so much away from the game. I feel like it wouldn't be the same if it wasn't him. If all the actors weren't the voice actors, it wouldn't be as good.
Right.
And the other game I was playing is Until Dawn. And Until Dawn is a horror game. I don't know why I've been playing so many horror games recently. Maybe because it's Halloween.
There you go. It's October. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's good old Halloween scary time, so I had to play all the horror games. And I was not unhappy about that. Anyway, so Until Dawn is kind of the exact same thing as a Telltale, is that it's a story that plays out, practically a movie, and it gives you decisions, It's, do you hide under the bed? Do you jump out of the window? Do you take the scary shortcut, or do you go and take the long way around? So it's almost the exact same thing as the Telltale games, just slightly different the way that, it's not really character interactions. It's more like, what you're doing, if that makes any sense. Right,
yeah. Like, you want to go left, you want to go right. Stuff like that.
Yeah. And the game has some pretty cool quick time events. So it's, hit X, hit square, hit triangle, and it gives you half a second to make that, or to hit that button. Usually or what I found, it's like when you go a shortcut or whatever, there'll be like 3 quick time events because you like almost fall down, and
Okay.
If you want to take the shortcut, you have to be paying attention and be good at quick time events, apparently. Luckily, I'm the master at quick time events, and I mastered that game. I haven't beaten the game. I'm probably about halfway through. The first thing I want to mention with the game is the voice acting. The voice acting is great. These are all professional actors in this game, and I can't remember a single name. But these are some professional actors.
Yeah.
The graphics are amazing. Every character is practically lifelike, so you feel like you're watching a live-action movie.
Okay.
It's very good, but I do want to mention the voices, for some reason, sound like compressed. Now, I was playing the game, rather, with a headset on, and that might have been a problem. I might have just been the headset wasn't reading the voices very well, or I don't know, but the very first thing I noticed about the game was that the voices sounded weird. And I think it was that the voices sounded like they were recorded in a studio, which they exactly were recorded in the studio. They weren't recorded, up on a mountain or something. So when you hear the voices is just so crystal, so perfect, so clear. Then again, it sounded like there was some sort of compression or something weird going on. Again, might have just been the headphones.
Like it doesn't match the environment.
Exactly.
Like what are you trying to say?
Just the voices initially sounded off to me. I don't know what it was. That's something that really stuck out, and I was thinking to myself, this is a very high budget game, clearly, and it seemed like that shouldn't be the problem. It might be that I'm a bit of an audiophile, and I really listen out for stuff like that. So, I mean, you're 99% of the people that play the game would never notice that, but it's just something that stuck out to me. And then when I played through the game further, it kind of went away. I didn't notice it as much. So it might have just been something right in the beginning. It might have even been like the first voiceover just hit my ear wrong, and it made me like really try to pick it out. But, I don't know. It's just something that came up when I was listening to the game, and it took me aback. I wasn't expecting that. I kind of expected the game to sound as beautiful as it looked, because the game looks amazing.
Yeah.
Brings me to another point, is the controls. So it gives you the option to use the motion sensor and the controller, kind of like the Wii controller nunchuck weirdness, or just use like the thumbsticks. And I wanted to so bad to use the motion sensor to like oh, it's gonna be like, I'm really there, and I'm making these decisions or whatever. So all it really does is when you have to make a decision, just like two options come up on either side of like your character's face, and he like looks to one of them or looks to the other one. If you look at it long enough, he makes that decision. So all you really do with the motion controls is turn the controller to the right or turn the controller to the left.
Yeah, that doesn't sound very exciting.
Exactly. And then the other part of it is the game starts off and one of your characters has like a gun and he's doing like some target practice or whatever, and he's just like shooting at targets. You don't just aim with the thumbstick like you would do in any other game. It's like tilt the controller and then he kind of moves this way, and it was very awkward to try and use those controls for that. And again, it immediately took me out of it, and I wasn't frightened or scared for the characters. I was like, come on, stupid controller. I want to aim this way. No, damn it. So again, something that immediately took me out of the experience, which if you're trying to make a horror game is the exact opposite of what you want to do.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have the PlayStation Eye or whatever the heck it is, so that may have affected it, because I'm sure the motion controls would probably work in tandem with that and would make it easier. So again, that might be my own fault for doing that. It took me out of the gameplay, and I had to go into the options menu and turn that off like 15, 20 minutes into the game.
That doesn't sound very, very fun at all, doing it that way.
It wasn't fun. And so, once I switched it over to the thumbstick, it worked fine, and I was able to make my turn head to the left decision or turn head to the right decision with relative ease.
I find it interesting that these games try to get you more into the gameplay, into the atmosphere by making you move your body and whatever and whatnot in these weird ways. But what a lot of people what actually helps is just sitting there and using your thumbs to move the screen around, and that's really what puts you in the game. Not making all these weird movements and stuff with your body to supposedly get into the gameplay,
Yeah, and that's there's another part to it as well, and it's the don't move, which I think is ingenious, really. So I think that's where they were coming from, is they have a part of the game where you have to hold the controller still, and there's a little graphic that comes up on the screen, and it's the front of the PlayStation controller, the little like lit up part of the PlayStation controller, and there's like a box, and you have to just keep it inside of that box, and if you move it a little bit, it starts going outside of the box, and you have to keep it right in the middle of it. That works very, very well. So it's you're hiding from big scary guy, and so you have to keep completely still, or your character is staying completely still, so you have to stay completely still as well and hold the controller perfectly still.
Okay. Yeah.
That I love. That's just fantastic. But the other motion controls are just, I don't know, I'm not gonna say they're stupid, but I didn't like them. My own personal opinion, I didn't like them at all. Didn't work for me. Didn't really do it for me. But the don't move one, that one did it for me. I really like that. I'm really enjoying it. I haven't beaten it yet, as I said, so I can't wait to actually finish the game. I really want to see what happens.
Cool.
Maybe I'll get to talk about that next week, of the glorious ending of Until Dawn, and I'll eat all the words I just said now about it. So.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. So how about you, Daniel? What have you been up to?
I've just been hanging out with the family and playing some family games on the board games there. And I've actually finally got to play the new expansion for Camel Up. It's called Camel Up Super Cup. That one is just, it adds more spaces to the racetrack. So Camel Up is a race game where you're betting on the different camels, who you think is going to be in first place at the end of each round, and who's going to be in first place overall in the whole race. And you're going through, you can put different tiles down in their way that makes them either move forward or backwards a tile, so you can kind of manipulate them a little bit, because you're trying to, let's say you bet on the green camel to be first, but the blue camel is going to go on top of it, because the way it works is if a camel is on top on another camel, because if a camel ends its move in the same space as another camel, it actually goes on top of that camel. So the camel on top is actually in first place, and the second one down is in second, and so forth. So,
and it's the camel that moved last into that space that goes up on top of the other one, right?
Yep, and that will be the first place camel.
Yeah.
And so say you don't want the blue camel to maybe end up on top of yours that you're betting on. So you're going to put a tile in the way that says move back one space if you end your move here and whatnot. So it moves back, and you can make it go forward one space. Well, this expansion adds 2 more players. You can have 10 players now instead of 8 players. It adds more spaces to the track, so it's a little longer game. And it has a mechanic where it gives you extra dice now, because each camel has 1 die, and now it gives you an extra die for each camel. But it only goes in there into the pyramid, because it's a pyramid that actually checks the dice, and then you flip it upside down, and you pull a lever, push a lever open, and a die falls out, and that's what camel moves. Which camel moves.
I do want to say that pyramid rolling of the die thing is really cool. I am totally on board with that. It looks awesome. It feels sturdy in your hand when you do it, and yeah, it's satisfying.
Right. You grab the pyramid, and you shake it. You hit all the dice in there, shaking around, and then you build up the tension, because when it gets closer to the end of the round, you're just like, oh, there's only 3 more, there's 2 or 3 more camels that can move, right? And you're hoping that it's the one camel you need to move and not the other one. So you flip the pyramid over and you push the lever open and the die falls out, and you're just waiting to reveal it, and that's like the reveal of the die, see what camel moves and how many spaces. And it's like, and that's fun, it adds fun to the excitement to the gameplay, having that.
Yeah, it does.
That pyramid in there. This expansion adds an extra die for each camel. And what happens is the camel is in last place at the end of each round. You actually put the extra die into the pyramid along with the other dice that are already in there. So it gives a chance to the camel in last place to catch up, because he's going to have 2 dice in there now instead of 1. It's like a catch-up mechanic pretty much for camels.
Was that just kind of because one would separate a whole lot from the rest of the group, and they would just be like, oh, clearly I don't have to bet on that guy?
Yeah, there's been a couple of games where there was definitely a camel that was never going to catch up. And it's like, okay, that's going to be the last camel. Because you can also bet on the overall loser of the whole race. So after a little bit, you can see that camel, there's no way. So you can bet on that one to lose. But sometimes they do come back, but it's a little rare. But this makes it a little more, exciting. Like, oh, now there's 2 dice in there. And potentially you can move 6 spaces now, because you can move 1, 2, or 3 spaces on the dice there. So this expansion comes with 4 modules that you can add to the game. So the first one I explained was that one, the dice. The second one is you can play them all together or individually. So the second one is a photographer, it's like a little camera, like an old school camera from like the 40s or whatever, on the tripod that you put next to a spot. And if any camel ends up on that spot, it's like the photographer took a picture of the camels, and you get $1 or 1 coin per camel in that spot. And so you can somehow end up with 5 coins, at the end of the round, because all the 5 camels ended up in that spot somehow, which happened to me in this game. The very first time I used a photographer.
This is like a card you put down, or like a little tile that you put down in the square, and then if anything lands on there, you get the coins from it?
It's actually like a 3D cutout. Like you build it once you get the game. You punch out the stuff and you bend the cardboard, and it's like a little 3D cutout that is like an actual tripod with a camera on it that you put on next to the board. So it's like another cool little addition to the game.
But one of the characters, I'm saying one of the characters puts that down and then gets all the coins from it, though.
No, you do. Like you'll take a card that says you're the photographer now, and then you grab that.
Oh, okay.
You'll grab that piece and you'll put it next to a position, to a spot, to a space.
Yeah.
And if any camel ends up in that space, you'll get 1 coin per camel.
Gotcha.
At the end of the round. So, and the other ones add more different style of gameplay of you can have a partner in betting, but that's not that important now. I think these two are ones that I used so far. And they were pretty fun. They definitely added more excitement to the gameplay. It extended the gameplay a little bit more, because when I was playing the game, this base game, I did think it was a little bit short. And I'm glad that they added the extra spaces there to the game.
Oh, so they've actually added more spaces on the board itself?
Yeah, it's got 4 spaces now, 4 extra spaces.
Oh, okay.
It had 7 spaces before, now it has 11 spaces. And the gameplay, it's a 30-minute game, so it's a fairly fast game, and I would say that's pretty accurate for the gameplay time. So, because that's important. Some people don't want to spend too much time in games, and that's something I'll be talking about later. The length of gameplay.
And you think that works for that game, though? You don't think like an extra 15, 20 minutes added onto that game would really make it any better? I think not necessarily. I think it might go a little longer, just because people might think during their turn, trying to figure out the odds. Yeah. That's what make it go longer. But like if the board had like 48 squares, it wouldn't really add anything to the game, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think it will take away from it, actually. I think right now it's pretty good balance of just long enough that you don't get tired of betting every single round, and you can kind of see things you can kind of guess how it might end easier, the whole game, because it's not too long, where you don't have too many spaces to try and figure out. Because you could get wild. Because when a camel moves, if it has a camel on top of it, it takes that camel with it. So say blue's on top and yellow is in the bottom, right? Yellow moves first, so yellow takes the blue camel along. So blue is still in first, and you just moved for free, pretty much. And then the next turn, the blue die is still in the pyramid, so the blue camel is still going to take off and be in the first, in first place.
And that's when I played it. That really threw me for a loop. I failed so much because it seemed like every time I was like, oh, this camel is clearly going to make it out in front. It would jump on the back of another camel and then ride an extra 3 spaces, and I'll be like, come on.
Yeah, that's pretty fun to try and figure out. It's like, ooh, I could bet on this camel, but I bet the next turn the red camel is going to jump on top of it. Now it's going to be in first, and so I don't know if I should bet on this one first or bet on red. But what if red doesn't move and the blue camel moves first? And it's like it's fun to think of that.
Yeah, and that's something that adds a whole lot of tension to the dice roll, as you were saying, is when you're shaking that pyramid and you put it down. You're like, oh, come on, just don't jump on the back of that camel. Oh, come on.
Yeah,
always happens.
Exactly.
Always, or at least to me. But
yeah, and I actually won the game. That doesn't happen very often. I actually won the game.
You are lying to me right now. I
Somehow,
don't
no. I couldn't believe it.
Didn't happen.
I recounted, and I actually won. And Megan was last.
You counted it 5 times. They didn't believe you.
Yeah, Megan was last, and that's also something that doesn't happen often. I don't know if she was taking it easy or what, but
you just jinxed yourself. That's never going to happen again.
Yeah, I see that happening. That I will start losing every game again. I'll enjoy my win. I'll take it happily. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the things I've been up to this week. So we can head into the video game segment if you like.
Alrighty. On the video game segment this week, I want to talk about something that it seems to come up a lot, and it's the difference between indie games and AAA titles. I mean, the very first thing when I think about indie games and AAA titles are how indie games are just so much better in every single way. Now, of course, that's a very broad, arcing statement. It just seems to me, it's just, in my opinion, the way indie games are made as opposed to the way AAA titles are made. Normally, an indie game is, in the sense of an indie game, it's a small team making a very specific game with a small budget. Maybe it's a Kickstarter game, something like that. So they get a lot of feedback on, what they're making from the people that are going to be playing their game. Now, a AAA title is going to be pouring a whole bunch of money into a game, and they're going to be creating like focus groups and all these kind of things, to make their game better. A lot of the time, it does work. So a lot of game developers do beautiful job, and they make incredible games. Just, come on, that game is fantastic. There's no other way to say it. That game is just fantastic. Huge AAA title. Then again, Bethesda is an amazing studio, and everything they make is fantastic. And right. Fallout 4 is going to be unbelievable, and everyone already knows that. So yeah,
they know what they're doing. That's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. It's a game studio that knows what they're doing, and it just seems like they don't have the big corporate foot stepping on them all the time saying, oh, no, players don't want to be able to craft items, they want to have more voiceover. I don't know. It just seems like, Bethesda knows what they're doing, and their games speak for themselves, Yeah. An indie game, normally it's not funded by some huge corporation. It's either a Kickstarter or just some guy sitting behind a computer just typing away in his spare time, and the games just always seem to be better. It might be that these games have to focus. It's not, like a Batman. It's not Batman Arkham Knight. It's got everything. It's got driving and flying and punching bad guys and solving crimes and this mechanic and that mechanic and this voiceover and that voiceover and this graphical crazy boom bang shamalama ding dong. It's just got everything. And when you take a game and you try to make it everything, usually there are parts of it that don't do as well as the other parts, and it can take away from the game. I think of, let's say, the Sonic games, for instance. I cannot think of which one immediately pops into my head, but one of the 3D Sonic games, and you can ask a lot of people that know anything about 3D Sonic games, is that they're all terrible. That's kind of just common knowledge. Everyone knows that, and they're just bad. I can't speak from experience, unfortunately. I haven't played the 3D Sonic games. I've seen gameplay of these games, and I've heard other people talking about them. From what I get, these games they try to do too many things. It tries to, this character does this, but there's also this side mini game where you fish. You fish as a giant cat, and you fish for 6 hours trying to catch a frog, and I mean, why does that have to be in the game? That doesn't add anything to the game. Just, it's a game about Sonic. Make him run fast and too cool. Make that the game. It just seems like game developers just want to put everything into the game. Oh, we have to have this and we have to have that. That's where I think a lot of like AAA titles, they fall short because they're trying to do too many things. And some things obviously can't get polished perfectly because of time restraints and money restraints. They want to focus more on these things. So maybe drop that little bit of the game. But we've already invested so much time and money into that part of the game. Well, if it doesn't make the game better, get rid of it, So these are decisions for, big shot corporates and not me's. Probably a good thing that they're making it, not me, because a game I would make would probably be terrible.
You have everything in it because you can't help yourself.
But like an indie game, as I was saying, focuses a lot more on something. Like my favorite game of all time, I like to say now, is Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons. This game
really
it's oh god, it's just perfect in my opinion. It's perfect.
Good. Yeah.
There's one thing that I love about it is there's no talking. It's nonsense. They just hubba dubba 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 blah 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 blah. They're not saying real words.
Wait, what like that.
Have you played the game, Daniel?
Yeah. I think I'm halfway through it right now.
Oh, okay.
You were over when I was trying to show you the spot where it glitched and I couldn't get past the troll, and that I had to grab the key.
Yeah, that's right.
And I was like, am I doing something wrong here? And you said no, and I actually restarted it after you left, and I passed that section. So
okay.
I got past that section now.
Yeah. Well, it brings up another thing. Indie games, sometimes they have bugs in them.
Yeah.
Because they don't have a huge budget to iron out every single bug that could ever pop up in the game. But yeah, it's that game, it just knows what it is. It's got a story to tell. It's just a puzzle game where you control one character with one thumbstick, you control the other character with the other thumbstick, and the trigger buttons are the actions for each character. And so that's it. That's the entire gameplay of that game, and it's fantastic. Yep. I love it. It's so perfect.
Yeah, I like how when your brain gets confused. At least for me, that's when I'm trying to move one of them in the other. Like somehow I start moving the other one, it would just take off, and the one on the right, the little brother, would just kind of fall back somehow, and he will go to the left, and I was like, no, go to the right. But I moved the other guy to the right. It's like it's a pretty interesting feeling controlling both of them at the same time with the different thumbsticks.
Yeah, and it gets confusing when they like switch sides in the screen. Like the guy that you're controlling with the right thumbstick's on the left, and you're like, wait, it gives you that half a second of going, oh, come on, brain, do the thing that I want you to do.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool thing right there.
And just the story and the characters and just everything about that game, I absolutely love. And it's not, some huge epic game that has to last 60 hours because people won't pay $60 for a game that doesn't last 60 hours. That it adds nothing to the game. Just like we were talking in Camel Up, if you added another 48 squares to that game, you're just playing the game for a lot longer. And it's the same thing over and over again. It doesn't add anything to the game. Why do it? It feels like a lot of AAA titles do just that because people demand that the game lasts 40 plus hours or I'm not paying $60 for this game. And then it forces game developers to just stretch things out and make the game last longer, and it becomes repetitive and it becomes stupid, and I hate it, and it's stupid and they're dumb. And on that
that's why I pretty much don't play Call of Duty anymore, those type of games. I mean, I might play Battlefield, but I haven't played it in a couple of years now. But Call of Duty, I was just like, I'm done. Why am I doing this again? Like, I was just like, this is just the same thing over and over again. It's just, it's not my style. I don't find it entertaining anymore. But
I haven't played a single player or a first person shooter in a long time. I mean, it feels like the last first person shooter I played was Half-Life 2. Half-Life 2 Episode 2. It just every game seemed like it was a first-person shooter. I couldn't do it. Everyone felt exactly the same. And when I got on a rail station or a train or I found a generator that needed to be power upped, I was like, no, I'm done. I am not going to go find your stupid power supply to go power up this freaking generator that I have done in every first-person shooter ever made. I'm done. I'm not going to do it anymore. I quit. I'm out. Boom.
And somehow fight the same type of enemies over and over that always pop their heads up just to see exactly what you are, so you can in the exact same spot every single time, so you can just wait and shoot them in the head.
I don't know. I might just be getting old and jaded at this point. It was not enjoyable to me whatsoever, and that's kind of how I feel with first-person shooters nowadays. Is they're all the same. I'm just done with them. Game developers pushing out terrible games that aren't finished, that aren't done. They have to have day one patches because we overlooked this huge gaping problem in our game, and that is that indie games, they can create a game that's very specific. Our game is about jumping over obstacles and hitting blocks with your head. That's it. That's what our game is about. And then they can make it perfect. They can just put all their time and effort into making the gameplay feel great, give it great game feel, and, make you feel good. Whereas just AAA titles, there's just so much that they have to put in there, so much they're required to put in there, that sometimes they just feel like they're stumbling over themselves. So
yeah. It's like the gameplay's diluted somehow. It's not pure, I guess.
Exactly.
dense.
There's too many aspects to it. Too many. Too many cooks makes the broth bad and not taste like broth. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. That's the saying.
Yep. That's the saying. If it wasn't, it is now. I just coined it right now. Okay, why don't we go ahead and move into the board game segment?
All right. In this board game segment, I want to talk about the length of play in games, and the game I'm going to use to talk about this the length of plays is Eldritch Horror. Since I just played it, and it's October and horror and stuff, so
gotta play the scary games.
Yeah, and this game is good. I like it. So first off, right there, I enjoyed the game. Now, the main turnoff, I think, for a lot of people for this game is the length of the game. This game, I think, just the shortest amount of gameplay is 120 minutes. Right there, boom, 2 hours at least it will take. And if you add more people, it goes up. With every player that you add is about 30 minutes extra of gameplay. And I don't dislike long games if they keep me engaged. And Eldritch Horror keeps me engaged because it's a story, and you're building a story in the game. As you're going through the different cities and countries and whatnot, looking to thwart the rise of the elder god, whatever. And it's a Cthulhu game, by the way, so you have all these monsters popping up everywhere around the world. It's like a globe-trotting game. You have to travel to different countries and close gates that are opening throughout the world, and before the elder rises and destroys the world and devours it and whatnot.
And the portal always opens up on the opposite side of the world, and it takes you 6 years to get there, and then it dumps a bunch of monsters, and then you lose. That was my experience with the game. So
I remember, I made you play it, and I don't think you really enjoyed it that much.
I can't say that it was a bad game. It didn't really grasp me. For the amount of time I put into the game, it was like, oh, come on. This guy popped out. How much does it kill this?
And that game is not very kind to you.
Yeah.
It will kick you down when you're already down and in the puddle. It will just keep kicking you and kicking you and kicking you. So you have to be in the mood for that experience to begin with. But just recently, actually, last night, I played it with my friend, Josiah. He and I really like the game. So he lives all the way across the country, and he has his own copy. And we actually Skyped. And we mirrored each other's copies, so we can see our own boards and figure out where we're going. And after like 2 hours, 3 hours, we were like, this is pretty good. We're gonna get this game. It's like we're gonna beat it. Actually, we were actually kind of hopeful. That doesn't happen very often in the game. And sure enough, within like 2 turns, all hell broke loose. People got cursed. 10 monsters came out. The Doom tracker went to 0. The elder god rose from his sleep, or her sleep. It was Shub-Niggurath, and that's a female. And she, we were just like, what happened here? It's like, how did this happen? We were like,
we were doing so
well. We were doing so well, and it just everything just went wrong. People got lost in time and space, and
that's never good.
But still. We still enjoyed it. I still have fun, even though I played it until 2 a.m. It was still a fun experience, even though we were getting a bus kicked. And the thing with long games is a lot of people, they'll start playing and they'll just be like, oh, it's at least 2 hours long. And right away, they just turn off from even being open to the game. And one of the biggest games that always gets mentioned when you talk about the length of play is Twilight Imperium, 3rd edition. Apparently that game, I've never played it, but I've heard plenty about it because the podcast that I listen to, one of the guys really likes it, and he always mentions it pretty much when he has the chance. And it's a long game. It's longer than Eldritch Horror. I think 6 or 7 hours will be a regular playthrough of that game. Yeah, it's like an epic. It's like a sci-fi epic. Apparently, it's about building your empire in the galaxy and then controlling. I've never looked into it and never really read about it. I just kind of get ideas of what it is about, but it's about like you control an area control type of game, and you're trying to build your empire and get resources and whatnot. And that one, it's pretty intimidating to me too. To somebody that I'm like, I don't mind playing a long game, but man, I don't know if I could handle that one type of thing. So
yeah.
It could be having the length of a game could be bad, and it's funny that sometimes different publishers will put the game time. You know, a lot of them do nowadays. They'll put how long estimated time is. And it seems like a lot of them kind of lie and say a shorter time because I know most people are not looking, if they see an hour, they'll be like, oh no, I'll put it back. But if they'll see like 35 minutes estimated, you know, they might give it a shot. But really, it's an hour long. So it's
you're saying publishers are down guessing their games like, oh yeah, it only takes 35 minutes when it really takes like 45 at least?
Yeah, right. And it adds, when you add more players, the game lasts longer. And sometimes they'll say like, if you add more players, it's 30 minutes per player, kind of like Eldritch Horror. And but the thing about the long games here is the thematic. Is that game, the Eldritch Horror, really has a lot of theme. Like wherever you go, you do an encounter, and it's a story. You read a story. It's like you're walking down an alley, and you heard somebody scream. You go and rescue them. You go help them out, and you find that there's 3 whatever monsters from Cthulhu mythos, and it really does use all the mythos from the Cthulhu. And you got to roll will, so you have 2 dice to roll, and you have to succeed with a 5 or a 6. And if you pass, something happens. If you fail, something else happens. You know, so if you don't want to fail in this game, that's the thing. If you fail, bad things will happen. But as you're going through the game, you're building this story of what's going on in your character. And if you really get into it, as you explain, so you go rescue these people, you fail, right? Oh, they beat you up, and you go to the hospital, and you broke a leg and stuff like that, or you have a bad back. At one time, I had one of my characters in another game. He's an old dude. He went crazy. He lost sanity, and he got paranoid. And then he also got a bum leg, so he had to go to the hospital. It's like all these crazy things were happening to this character. And then he finally dies.
A string of bad luck, huh?
Yeah, so it's the theme really helps with the long game. If it has a lot of theme, it's helpful. If it's just mechanics and you just kind of do this and that and you don't try to play along with the theme, it doesn't help. So Eldritch Horror, it's a good game. It came out, I remember the very first time I played it, it came out in 2013. I was excited to play it, and the store by me had a demo of it, like before it came out, and we went to it, and it was 8 players. The game takes 8 players. It was 8 of us. None of us had ever played it before, and we sat down, and it took us. I think we played it almost 8 hours or something crazy like that, and we weren't even halfway done. Well, I'll say we've never played it. None of us have played it, and it's a long game to begin with. So after that, I said I'll never play it with 8 players. It's like that would take way too long. It might be like half an hour before it gets around to you again, to your turn. And on your turn, you just move your character and you're done. And you gotta wait for the other people to do their thing. So I think the max I'll play that game is 4. 4 people, I think, is the max I'll play it with. In fact, last night, my friend and I, we played a 2-player game, but we each controlled 2 characters. That way it's a 4-player game, you know. But because you have, with more characters, you have more opportunities to get the monsters that spawn. But then again, more monsters spawn if you have more characters. So it kind of evens out.
That's something I wanted to ask is, do you think the game would be a little easier if you were playing with 8 characters rather than just 4?
The reason I would say no is because when you have more characters, more gates open every turn and more monsters spawn every turn to accommodate the more players, because then it'll be way too easy if you have only 2 gates and you have 8 players running around and you just close them and they have nothing else to do. So it kind of it scales to each amount of player count. But overall, I think long games have a bad rep for a lot of gamers, and there's a couple of people I follow on Twitter and YouTube and that will not play long games. They'll say 2 hours, no. They just won't do it. They're like the 30-minute games.
Anything over 2 hours, I'm done. That's kind of how I am with first-person shooters. Any first-person shooter, I'm done. Don't even give it to me. I don't want to play it. Yeah,
exactly. So it's funny when you're talking about the indie games and all that, and the AAA titles. I could see that. I could kind of relate to that in the board game industry with Kickstarter. Kickstarter is kind of big for board games, and not a lot, but it seems like many Kickstarters, I will consider them like indie games because they're just funded by the people and they can't build such a good looking game, you know?
Yeah.
The gameplay might be good. So there's been some Kickstarter games that actually have been big after they come out because the gameplay, even though it's not a pretty game and highly produced and whatnot, is still really good and they've done well. Like the very first one is Mission Red Planet, if I remember correctly. That's one of the very first Kickstarter games that did really well when it came out.
Now, was Was Boss Monster a Kickstarter game?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Pretty sure
and that's a game that I absolutely adore. I really like that game. It's a really fun mechanic. I love the 8-bit artwork. It's a really cool game, really fast game, really easy, to show somebody else. And it's a card game, and I love those. So when I saw, it's one of the things when I saw in the store, just the artwork itself immediately reached out to me, and it touched my inner gamer soul that I have. And I was like, 8-bit graphics, want to play. And I was not upset with that, and the fact that it was just a Kickstarter game makes it even better. That game wouldn't have been made if Kickstarter wasn't a thing, and people, and these indie developers, whether they be video games or board games, are allowed to create the products that people want to play because they can get the funding from it from the people who are going to be playing their game. And then, of course, they get feedback from them when they do like little test things or,
Yeah, but then there's the other aspect of it that there's going to be other games that are going to come out on the Kickstarter side that are not good because they don't have the experience of developing a game, the process that it actually is involved in developing a board game. It's just, it would be something like you and I getting together, hey, let's make a game, let's put it on Kickstarter, but we'd never developed the game before. We have no idea all the steps that is required, and
Excuse
it might not
me,
be as good.
I created a game when I was in 4th grade, thank you very much. I don't know if it was 4th grade.
It was amazing.
But I know I've told you this story, Daniel. I created some board game for like some project in school. I don't know.
For your class, yeah. Right.
Yeah, some class in school was like, do something creative. And for some reason, I was like, I want to create a board game. It might have been because I just played a cool board game or whatever. And I can remember, this is true, believe it or not, that kids would stay in from recess to play my board game. I'd set it up at the table when we go through the board game. It was a lot of fun. It was like, you'd like collect items. Someone would have to collect a key over here and then open this door to get to the next area, and there was like a little boss or somebody like roaming around, and I can't remember a whole lot from it. I really wish I had kept it, but it was cool. I thought it was great. So there you go, Daniel. I'm gonna start a Kickstarter, and we're gonna create my board game that I created when I was in 4th grade.
Is it a roll and move game? Roll and move. Surprise.
Roll and move.
So what do you think of length of games? Do you think that affects your buying habits of board games?
Oh, entirely. I am on the side of anything. I actually even cut that in half. Anything over an hour, I don't want to play because normally the people that I'm playing with are people that don't play board games all the time. Mm-hmm. I'm playing with the people that, I'm trying to introduce them to board gaming. And so if I whip out an Eldritch Horror and say, okay, this game's going to take 6 hours. This game's going to take 6 hours to play. They're going to get up and just walk away without saying anything.
Don't say a word. Just get up and go. But
exactly. But no, don't wait. No. Yeah. So I have to get games that are much quicker to play, and I found just card games just do that for me. It's easy to whip out a card game and go bup. Hey, I lose, you win. Now you love this game. Haha. Take that.
Well, so that's another thing of card games, the setup time. We've talked about it before, but that's another thing that adds to the gameplay is the setup time and takedown time. So that would be something that we can discuss in another episode, but that's an interesting aspect of the game that I never really thought about until I encountered a game that took me like half an hour to set up.
Like Camel Up, where you have to build the little thing and build all.
Wow, that's Camel Up really takes like 5 minutes to set up once you build the camera. But a board game, I should say, card game that takes a while to set up is Marvel Legendary, and I've made you play it before. Right?
Yeah.
The superheroes. That game takes. The reason I don't play it as much, even though I really enjoy it, is the setup time. I look at it, I'm like, I'm gonna have to spend like half an hour sifting through the cards, shuffling them all up, put them in the right place, picking my team. It's just like, sometimes when I actually set it up, I leave it out for like a couple of days so I could play it multiple times before I have to put it back together.
Just leave it out on the table. Okay, we can't use that table for the next week because that's the card game. I'm in the middle of something. Don't notch it. No. Then you bump the table and everything gets knocked over and you have to do it anyway.
But yeah, I find that the shorter play games kind of tend to do better, and the long play games are more of a kind of like a niche group of people, board gamers. Like I said, I will play it, I will play a long game. I like Eldritch Horror. I will play it, but it has to be the right theme and the right kind of gameplay. And I think it helps that Eldritch Horror is a co-op game. Unlike Twilight Imperium, it's not. Eldritch Horror, you work together and try, beat the elder gods. I always say that their name wrong, but and you're working together, so it helps that kind of make the game a little easier, I guess, to handle the long hours of play. Because we're gonna get ready to play Pandemic Legacy, right? So that's gonna be technically you're gonna be playing the same game for like 20 hours potentially, right?
Yeah.
But the difference is you're gonna play it like in hour increments. It's gonna be like an hour long. The game ends. The next game you set up, it's going to be a little different, and it's going to be an hour long, and you're done, But it's technically, I guess, the same game for 20 hours, but you're not sitting there for 20 hours straight, like you would for Twilight Imperium or Eldritch Horror, where you'll spend 4 hours getting your butt kicked by the game left and right.
Yeah.
Somehow, I enjoyed it for some reason. It's a fun game that does not hold back. On the very first turn, it starts. Boom! You're getting paranoid. You lose 2 health. You lose 2 willpower. It doesn't lay off.
And it
of
just
you.
keeps going from there and there until everyone dies and they get mad and they flip the table. Yeah. You got anything else you want to add, Daniel?
I do not.
Alrighty. With that, I'd like to thank everyone for listening to Games and Gaming Podcast. And as always, you can reach us through the following. You can reach us on Twitter at Games and Gaming. You can email us at gamesandgamingpodcast@gmail.com. You can visit our website at gamesandgamingpodcast.com. And until next time, I'll see you online.
And I'll see you at the table.